along. I think in terms of like direct policy and that would specifically help us as a part of the Green New Deal, it's weirdly tangential and something I keep thinking about in the context of sort of a full and deep and interconnected woven cooperative economy, is that like some of the protections that like the worker protections and the access to healthcare and would help like most small businesses, I'm sure most co-ops, like help us thrive and actually focus on our mission as opposed to like scrambling to try to figure out how we can meet our basic needs and get access to the things that we need. So I think that just in terms of like the baseline support of like we are dedicating ourselves as a society in the next 10, 15, whatever years to like really deeply transition. For us, it would matter, like in terms of our like daily operations, I think it would matter a lot because, you know, we're working with a lot of some academics and like academic institutions as well as advocates and nonprofits and such. And we need to make smart choices and decisions as we do this transition. And I am personally not a person who like, it's fine, I'm in the like data access world, but I don't believe that more data is going to help us meet our challenges, which I think are largely political. But we also can't have like a clean energy transition that costs more money. I like deeply believe that we can figure out a way. I know we can, and like solar costs are going down so hard, like energy efficiency and like all of the technology and kind of widgets and gadgets that we need to move forward on a Green New Deal and a like clean energy transition are in place. Everything's not perfect. We're gonna have to figure stuff out, like, but technologically, like we can do this. But there are still like deeply entrenched in interests, of course, like if there were a big like clean energy requirement passed, I know that the utilities would go to their commissions and ensure that they were making the most money off of this transition. And, you know, in some ways they're largely, you know, corporations. That's their like legal requirement, is to go make money. But if we don't have kind of advocates with enough tools in there, ensuring that the transition happens in as just a way as possible, we're going to end up in a worse place than we are. And I think that, I think that we can't, it would be, like we need to like deeply transform our economy in order to meet the challenge of climate change. Why don't we also, in that process, like it seems really hard to me to actually meet climate change without actually also caring about people in the process. So I think that we need to do both. And I think there's a lot of challenges along the way. And I think that, it all feels scary and tenuous, but I think that like little steps and continuing to kind of push the movement is the way I find hope that things are kind of moving along, but it's still scary sometimes.
It's scary. Yeah, Ruby, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that like one of the biggest challenges that I feel like is that the feeling that there's no sense of urgency out there, or a privileged mindset that there isn't this problem in our country, right? When really it is a problem in our country and a lot of our cities, right? So I think education and community outreach is super important. And we need to have more businesses and organizations like yours to help get the word out. You know, like there are groups in our city that need our help, that don't have clean water, that don't have access to electricity, when we can have, you know, we have all of these resources available. There's no reason why we can't get that to marginalized communities. Like this is something that if we had more smaller organizations in the cities and in the states beating that same drum, then I feel like we could reach our goal, which is to save our planet. Like it's a fundamental issue. It's real. And a lot of people, I think that we just need to kind of just keep educating people and getting the word out and doing our small part. You know, it starts in one company in one city, and then it becomes this, huge movement. And I think that we just need to focus on doing that.
Yeah, Raphael.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ruby. It's the outreach is something really important. I think that one of the bigger challenges that I see personally that we face as an industry is the industry right now is growing a lot. I mean, the demand is increasing more and more, and as that demand increase for more solar out there, there's also a lot of companies that are trying to take advantage of that. The companies that are not doing ethical work, which is a big problem, and they tend to target, you know, communities. Just in my experience, the people that I know, Spanish speaking friends, you know, and people who are not so familiar with how solar works, they often have all these stories of people knocking on their doors and giving them this fantastic solar quote that, you know, it will save them thousands of dollars, and tell them that they need to sign right now, and it just and it's not true. I mean, that's really the what I'm trying to get to, is that they tend to lie to people, and it creates this sort of negative um, negative view of the industry, and affects us all, right? So I mean, I think that's a big problem. And I have conversations with people sometimes that I meet that have similar stories like that. People who are really, you know, before having that experience, they have a lot of hope on solar and how it was pushing towards climate change, and this is great, and I'm looking forward to it. And then they have an interaction with a company like that, and it's a nightmare for them, and they don't want to get involved in that anymore. So it's one of those bigger problems that I really see. I really don't know how we can prevent things like that, other than us trying to expand or work the people that we work with, and trying to educate more people, and you know, spread the word that solar works. But you know, there's things that you have to think about before making the decision of going solar.
Although, you know, I think that one of the biggest barriers is the perception that there are barriers. We don't think much about barriers. We think about opportunities, and feel that an important aspect of our work is the creation of models for the new economy that Christina was talking about. And I think that the National Green New Deal is going to accelerate this transition that's absolutely essential. But I think for individual companies like us, one of the great things it'll do is provide a new framework for our own modest efforts, because it will bring new confirmation, it will bring new audience, it will bring new fuel to the work that we've been doing for most of a half a century. So I think it's kind of a launch pad.
Well, let me ask you all to, I want to push you a bit to say a bit more about this issue of like growing your sector and expansion, because I'm hearing what Raphael is saying, right? That this, as attention comes to solar, it's an opportunity for big companies to scale. On the left, we often say, or in progressive circles, you know, that we need to scale up the good small experiments more quickly. Is it easy in the co-op sector to scale up fast? Do you think that ultimately means many more co-ops? Does it mean co-ops getting bigger? I mean, we hear about companies like Mondragon, which are co-ops, but in general, we think of businesses scaling up quickly. We tend to think of private companies and often cutting corners. So I'm curious to hear, like, how easy or hard is it for the co-op world to scale up? And are there policy supports that can make it easier to scale up while maintaining the kinds of values and practices that are distinctive to the co-op tradition?
I'll jump in a little bit because I've thought about this, not in the context of my own co-op, because we're not trying to like get gigantic, but I have thought, like, I think that in order to scale well, you need access to steady capital. You need access to financing, and you know, I think everyone in the co-op space knows that that's like not the easiest barrier to cross all the time. And it also, and I think that, yeah, I struggle with like scale and speed in the face of climate change versus my like desire for an kind of end state economy is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like my desire for where I would like to see our economy move more towards, which is one that is not kind of explosive growth. And in the context of like, if I wanted, or if, you know, if my co-op wanted to get a lot bigger and we needed some access to outside capital, we would be ceding some of our power. Like we would be beholden to our financiers, which I think that's a standard practice, but it also like changes the shape and nature of the incentives of the co-op. So I think that in my ideal world, you know, again, we you know need to move forward on this transition. I think that if we don't bake in some requirements for more like equitable business structures in order to move forward that goal, to meet that end, we're going to get, you know, predatory big solar. We're going to continue to get predatory big solar, and that sucks. Like that we don't need to do that, as long as if we like incentivize like those companies are being predatory because it's in their best interest to be predatory. And I'm a big kind of believer in the fact that we all kind of live up to our own, like the incentives that are in front of us. And if you're incentivized to cut corners, then you will. And if you're a utility, you're incentivized to like charge out the wazoo for little gadgets and gadgets that like no consumer wants and no ratepayer wants, and like you'll do that. So I think that taking a step back and thinking about how we structure and how we incentivize for better business practices in the process of this clean energy transition is really important. And I think, like, you know, encouraging co-ops and encouraging B Corps and that kind of thing is could be a big part of that process. Didn't really answer your scale question, but sort of.
Kind of did. Yeah, John, go ahead.
I think that scaling is not only about getting bigger, it's about getting better. And becoming more effective is a means of scaling. That's what Amicus does for people. And quick story about an organization called Building Energy Bottom Lines, which is a group of another 60 companies, but it's regional. It's in New England, confined to New England. And it came from a group of companies who are in the business of doing the best technological work in the architecture and building and solar. But many of us seeing that to really make an impact on climate change, we need to not just do the best technical work, but we need to be much better businesses. And so binding together as a peer group network to help each other's business practices become absolutely stellar. That's a means of scaling, getting better.
Yeah, Rafael.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that scaling, the way I see it is there's some risk involved into just growing and growing, right? If I remember correctly, one of the first meetings that we had as an owner group at Technicians for Sustainability, we have that discussion. We talk about growing our business, and I think in terms of from a co-op perspective, growing, it's something that we could make happen because as I was saying before, the market is growing a lot. There's a lot of demand now, but it's part of our mission is to provide this service to our customers. We want to be here for them. We want to be able to take care of their systems to make sure that they're working properly. And if we just start expanding to other regions where we don't have the ability to provide the same high quality service to those customers, then we risk damaging that quality of our services and products. And I think that's part of what John was saying, which is, you know, we try to get better and better. but we are focusing on the people that we share our community with.
I serve on the board of a company called Namaste Solar in Colorado, another Amicus member, and one of the largest Amicus members with several hundred employees. And their strategic plan for the next few years is 3 words: better, not bigger.
Yeah, I'll go for it, Ruby.
Oh no, I was just going to echo basically what they said. Scaling is not just getting bigger, it's getting better and bigger impact, right? And just continuing to grow and learn and evolve as the industry, as you know, our situation evolves. We want to evolve as well. And also attack not just, you know, the issues that what our mission has been, but also like things that we're starting to see on a daily basis.
And if we provide good models, then other small companies can spring up all over. And that's what we see happening now. That's what we see happening with co-ops.
Yeah, I was going to echo that same thing, that like, I think that in the co-op context, my desired scale is like, here's a good model and here's enough examples of it working. And therefore you're not going to freak out your bank when you ask for a little bit of money or whatever. Like, here's how, build enough of an ecosystem that it's easy to say, yes, this would work in this context. And we can do it in this way. So.
I wonder, to the financing and capital question, I mean, a Green New Deal should be able to make it easier to get access to capital. Obviously, a Green New Deal can mean 20 million things, and there's a couple of Q&As come in, and I'll get to those. But I think we don't really, I mean, nobody has decided exactly what the Green New Deal will be. Obviously, it doesn't fully exist yet. But imagining like the possibility of growing public banking, for instance, as a source of low interest capital directed to things like co-ops. I mean, is that part of a conversation that you all are having? Like, what kinds of credit are best aligned with the values and practices of your co-ops?
One of the things Amicus has done is created a credit union, a solar credit union. And something that we see happening a lot, we're working on one in our community, is community investment funds. Small investors have nowhere to go. They either put their money in Wall Street or they put their money in a bank and get nothing. Community impact funds can allow small investors to invest in local companies and allow access to companies that might otherwise have a tough time getting capital. I think there's a great future in community impact funds.
Yeah, and the Clean Energy Credit Union, what it does is it's not just for Amicus members, but like John said, it was started by an Amicus member company, and it's just focusing on electric vehicles, solar systems for your home, just anything renewable energy related.
Yes, so Clean Energy Credit Union, I think it's been a great, has provided a lot of advantage for us, competitive wise. Actually, is what I use to get the solar on my house. So it is a great access for folks to be able to get their reach their renewable energy goals in a way where some other companies don't have access to something like that.
I think that I'm not the most familiar with all of the mechanics, but I think that community impact community investing and public banking with the right kind of community push around it, it could be very crucial for a lot of industries. It also depends on kind of what is pushed and incentivized and encouraged through those mechanisms. But I think that we need like good stable financing, and it's important to financially incentivize the kind of society that you want to see. And I think that's the kind of one of the pieces of the push of the Green New Deal of like, let's restructure things such that we get the outcomes that we actually want, not the ones we're getting right now. So
thank you. That's super helpful. And I'm so glad to hear about these different financing options, because I feel like, at least in my spaces, which are not sophisticated or brilliant co-op spaces, often folks think about the democratic energy economy just in terms of like energy organizations or firms, and forget that there's a whole world of financing to democratize as well, and that those things really will work both much better off in tandem, working together than separately. We've got a ton of really great questions coming in, so I'd encourage you to send in more questions, and I'm going to start asking them. But first, I want to
and I don't want them to know, because
so just a reminder, if you're joining us, to make sure you're on mute if you're not on the panel, and to turn off your video, please. Just to ease the load for everyone. I think we have some.
I just thought of it.
Shoshone, I think you.
Caleb, I'm going to take you shopping.
Shoshone is not on mute. There we go. Yeah, thanks. There are a couple others, I think. Zoom living, good times. So I want to put to you a kind of scenario here, which is, imagine that you get a phone call from AOC, or I don't know, maybe Ed Markey. You could pick your politician, maybe one of these apparently climate justice hungry Republicans I've heard about. But imagine that one of these like high profile politicians wants to come and meet you and get a tour of your co-op. Like what kind of message would you want them to take away to talk to the national audience about the role that co-ops could play in a Green New Deal? I think I and many others have watched this conversation grow and feel like they're hitting some points well and others not so well. I have not heard AOC talk a ton about worker co-ops in the context of a Green New Deal, although she sometimes will mention it. So how, and if you could sort of say what you would want to pass on, whether it's, maybe it's a story of something that's worked really well, maybe it's some talking points, like but fundamentally it's like, if you could show one of these political leaders around and help them tell the story of how co-ops nationally, tell the story nationally of how co-ops could really contribute to this, what would you hope that they would then come and take away from visiting your own workplace?
Well, as a worker co-op, our role is to create lifelong jobs with living wages and the best benefits on the planet. I mean, in our business, families always come first. So during the pandemic, we offered childcare stipends to those who have children at home and are suffering from the stresses that all that entails. So I would remind AOC, as if she really needs to be reminded, but I would remind her that when the people who are making the decisions benefit from the rewards of those decisions and bear the consequences as well, better decisions result. It's as simple as that. That's the beauty of a co-op.
Sold me. Okay, who else has some?
Send her around and we'll give her the spiel.
Okay, I'm looking at the other panelists here who are preparing their presentations for Rep. Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah, Christina.
That was much too succinct, John. I'm like, yeah, I would, one of the things that I often think about and would love to like expound and show is that like how interconnected all of the issues are that, we're all collectively dealing with. Like I wouldn't have been able to help start my co-op if I wasn't living in relatively stable, semi-stable housing co-op that was really affordable for the place that I was living in. And I also outside of work spent like years spending my like afternoons and evenings and nights and weekends trying to push for more affordable cooperative, like to legalize cooperative housing in my town in Colorado. And if I hadn't had to do that, I could have stayed focused on like the more tangible climate change issues. I think housing is a climate change issue, period. But I could have gone after the like more low hanging like electricity fruit that's totally there. And so I think that the ecosystem in which all of these individuals as well as companies sit inside of is really important. I think that the story that I've been kind of attempting to tell with my career in some ways thus far is that, like, especially in the clean energy transition, like, it can be better. Like, we can have cheaper rates that are like more stable and with like more choice for the consumer, and the utilities can be made whole and they can stay fine. That all can happen. It's like so accessible to us. We just need to get it over the political hurdles to enable, like, incentivize and even enable that different future to exist. So I think just like the economic reality of even the finances can be better. Like, we can get to a better place. I think that's the story that I would tell.
It's a strong story. Raphael.
Well, I think that I will also share my story from my point of view, which is it's interesting because when I came here, I came from Mexico. Life brought me here, and I was really thinking that I wanted to learn about renewable energies. That was really my goal. I never imagined that I was gonna fall into such a beautiful company. I have no clue what a coworker was. I mean, I really was not, I didn't have time to think about that. But then when I started learning about the whole mechanic of what it is, and I think even before Technicians for Sustainability transition into a worker co-op, we already had this beautiful environment of community. And I just, what I see, the way I see it and the way I understand it is that we have created internally as a company, and also with our community, this sort of way of doing business, very ethical, and there's a lot of trust between the way we work, between the way we interact with each other, and the way we interact with our customers. And I love that. I mean, I love being part of that. It makes things so satisfying, and I think that's the way it should be. I think there's still a lot of information out there about worker co-ops that is not very easy to access. So we need more access to that, I think. And yeah, I think that we are an example for a lot of companies out there. Because we have been able to create a successful business too, that is also trying to or providing support to solving all these issues that we are facing currently.
And I would echo what John said. These co-ops are companies that are they invest in their people, right? And you have good people that also invest in their community, and you start working with other organizations that are like-minded and have the same, common goal. Our motto at Amicus is we're stronger together, right? And when all of these like-minded co-ops and companies and organizations start working together, you can accomplish so much more, right? It doesn't matter who's in office. I think that the same issues will remain, right? That, like, we need to save our planet. We need to focus on those communities that don't have their essentials, right? That they need: clean water, electricity, and with all of the resources, that there's no reason why we can't focus as a group to get those resources to those communities that need it the most. And I would say, hey, this is what we're all working towards. This is something that, I think most people could agree that it's something that we need to pay attention to. And so, yeah, just continue to get the word out there and educate. I'm going to beat that same drum, like, educate people. These are what these groups are doing. Like, these are the resources in your community. And, knowing that where you spend your dollars counts. Like, focus on organizations that have the same values that you have, and use those and support those local businesses as much as you can. What do they do in their community? Where you use your dollars counts, right? So just more and more education, community outreach, like let people know what's out there and what they can do, you know, everyone doing their part. Together, you know, everyone can make a difference, so.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's very powerful. And I think, Raphael, your story, it speaks to, I think, this moment in a lot of ways. And, you know, so the Green New Deal, we think about AOC, but it's also youth movements like Sunrise. And I think one of the things they've really done is popularize and built with this model of storytelling-driven organizing, where if you, I mean, I'm sure you've all been to many of these meetings where folks get up and it's not just Sunrise, People's Action, many groups doing this now. You start by telling your story. What puts you in this? And I was hearing your story, Raphael, and hearing you talk, Ruby, about how this is really, for the individuals involved, is transformative. And makes me think like there is so much potential to tell the story of how individuals, especially like immigrants and people of color, the co-op is their best way into actually the world of business. Or into small businesses, and that has, you know, the fact that can be transformative, that feels to me like the AOC Instagram story, or the kind of like, you know, those viral TV ads or online ads that move people. And it occurs to me that could really spread in co-op space. So I want to get to some questions, and I'm actually going to start with a question that I think was directed at me just to answer, but then I want to hear you all react, because it's about the co-op Green New Deal relationship. And then I'll go through kind of questions in pairs for all of you to speak to. But one of the first questions is just, it was like a person said, I would be curious to hear from Daniel about opportunities, challenges around the Green New Deal, vision of the Green New Deal and co-ops, and someone else, you know, if co-ops are written into the Green New Deal bill. So the Green New Deal, as it exists, there's a resolution that AOC and Senator Ed Markey, who just got reelected in Massachusetts, introduced. But it's not a bill, it's sort of like a statement of values. And it has, I think, close to 90 co-sponsors now, something like that. And then there's a Green New Deal for Public Housing Act, which is the first kind of concrete bill that I worked on. And then there's some local Green New Deal kind of plans or bills. And I have found the co-ops are there, but sometimes barely. And working on the Green New Deal for Public Housing Act with AOC's office, you know, they were very keen to emphasize that public procurement of work for the retrofits should favor resident-owned businesses. And I was like, and cooperatives. And now it's in the bill. But, you know, I'm an old friend of socially, Esteban Kelly is the head of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. And so he, in many ways, a lot of my education in the sector has come from him. And just realizing, you know, every time someone says small business, I don't think co-ops have fully exploited the opportunity to say, no, that small businesses and specifically worker cooperatives. Anytime there is funding through public procurement can emphasize that. And through similar kinds of feedback, Michelle Wu, who's a city councilor in Boston, has passed a Green New Deal plan for Boston that now includes worker cooperatives, but in earlier drafts was just small businesses. So in addition to this whole scaling up question, and I'm curious to hear you all, I feel like American politics is full of this veneration of small business that doesn't always go the whole way to and worker cooperatives, which would fit so naturally and has this like cross-partisan appeal. And likewise in the Green New Deal conversation, I think, as you all have said, worker co-ops would make such a huge role, but I'm curious if you all also have the sense that, you know, we're not quite as prominent as maybe we could be in the kind of top line talking points about how this would transform economic life. John, you're on mute.
I think nothing could be truer. I think there are certain political figures, Bernie stands out among all of them, who are devoted to and understand the concept of co-ops. The chair of the House Small Business Committee, Nydia Velasquez, another one, believes in co-ops. It's just that it's still flying under the radar to some degree. And one of the things that I think is going to make it come alive is that we literally have 4 or 5 million small businesses started by baby boomers who have put their heart and soul in these businesses for 30 or 40 years, and they're wondering what the hell to do with them as they want to retire. And more it's becoming an entity of choice as businesses are not passed down to children. So I think there's a groundswell. A groundswell.
Yeah. Yeah, Christina, go ahead.
I agree fully that like I think that co-ops are sort of always maybe thought of. You know, it's like it's maybe an afterthought for most kind of big legislation, maybe. And I think that speaks to the need for organizations like the Federation and like more actual like let's join together and like we need like the co-op movement needs lobbyists. Like you know, I know lobbying is a dirty word or whatever, but like we like that's how things get done. Like Mo, whatever. Like we need folks who are like you, who are in the room drafting or in the virtual room drafting bills and adding in co-ops because people are like, oh yeah, sure, but just didn't think about it initially. So yeah, I think that yeah, we collectively need more advocates in the spaces and rooms that are kind of end up making those decisions.
Yeah, rooms, and I mean, movements, right? Like, I think what's interesting to me, and you all said, it's like, it's not at all a stretch. It's just like, oh, right, yeah, obviously, right? So there's nobody in the Sunrise Movement who's like, you know what? I don't like worker co-ops. No one is thinking that. And in fact, you know, I mean, I remember AOC on MSNBC shortly after she got elected. I think it was Chuck Todd was like, oh, do you even believe in capitalism? You know, she's like, oh. And he was like, do you believe that the government should provide basic services? She was like, yes. And he was like, well, what do you think private companies should do? She's like, well, consumer goods, like phones or pens or whatever. And he was like, okay. And she's like, of course, that could all be cooperatives. But so it's not, I mean, it feels like it's not, that the lift is kind of the storytelling and just elevating the issue a bit more. And to me, the idea of like co-op presence on the Hill makes sense. I know Esteban does work and others do as well. It seems it's not a case of like having to do mass persuasion so much as like entering into the narrative at the highest levels of the kind of the storytelling and just the intuition. Yeah, Raphael and Ruby, I see you nodding with slightly quizzical looks. So I'd be curious to hear you jump in.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, I think like Christina said, it often maybe is a little bit of an afterthought, but like John said, I think that that's kind of the direction that a lot of these small businesses are going in, you know, becoming these worker co-ops. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before it becomes more of a, you know, front and center as opposed to afterthought.
Yeah, here in Tucson, we actually recently were invited to be part of this new co-op that is being formed to basically provide support for a lot of small businesses who are, you know, companies who are trying to build their own business. And I can see that it's something that is growing, and it's starting to happen a bit more in a small community such as Tucson.
Gabriel, is that a local Arizona organization?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of it, but yeah. And there's a lot of, you know, the people that is involved in that. It's a lot of people that are immigrants and people who are struggling to find jobs, fair paid jobs, and it's fantastic to see that that sort of thing is happening. Yeah.
Nice. I'm just going to throw out, and you can pick up on this in later answers if you want, but also like in the conversations about labor, every conversation I've been in the Green New Deal treats unions and labor as the same. In the private sector, about 7% of workers are unionized. And the co-op is the co-op movement is another way in which labor is politically organized. And it's like, you have to include co-ops. And then of course, the other dimension is like racial justice and community investment. You know, if you want to talk about developing housing without displacement, you're talking about community land trusts, very often tools for communities of color to bring investment to their communities without displacement. So it's not just small businesses. I think there are other forms of discussion where it's like, oh my God, the co-op movement needs to be further ahead. So feel free to jump on these, but I'm going to just ask a couple more questions here to keep the questions coming. So a pair of questions. The first one, directed to John, says, I'd like to learn more about what John said about how the group of New England businesses felt they needed to make their businesses better in order to make an impact. So better in which way? And if someone else wants to jump on that, obviously go ahead. And the second question, what types of local organizations, like city or neighborhood organizations, have you all found to be good partners in addressing local environmental or climate change effects or issues more broadly? So a couple of questions. I'll just give you a space to answer one or both of them. Yeah, Raphael.
I can start talking about how we get better, because I think that's something that I personally often think about. As a company, I think that we try to stay on top of all these changes that are coming, all these utility rates that are changing and where things are going. So I think that what we do really well is that we have a good view of where things are going, and we are trying to prepare for it. So one of the things that we have been exploring for the last year, it's been storage technology. Something that in other states, I believe it's been happening for quite a while, but here in our region, we still don't have a great financial benefit to install a battery system. But there's a lot of other benefits right now. However, we are definitely the local company who is on top of it. I think that's a big part of how we always try to get ahead of the game. And really, we try to maintain a good level of within the company. The training that everybody gets, I think is of the highest level. Part of the reason why I was so happy to get involved with Solar Energy International is because for a while I was thinking about how Latin American countries are starting to get into solar and how things are growing down there, and it's really important, I think, to be able, for the people that is getting into the industry, to be able to have quality training and being able to really know how to safely install a solar system, so that we don't have situations like we had here where these big jobs, Walmarts have caught on fire, and creates this sort of negative view of what the industry is or what the technology is. So I think that's really something that we do. We can provide this sort of education and training to our members of the co-op, but also to everybody who is involved with TFS.
Beautiful, thank you.
About the question about the organization, I spoke about building energy bottom lines. So that organization was an outgrowth of the Northeast Solar Energy Association, which for 40 years has been on the leading edge of technology and policy in the solar and high performance building world. And a number of people in that organization started to get together and say, yeah, we're doing good work and we're getting good policy, but all these things don't matter if we're not particularly good at fulfilling expectations, at creating great client experience and customer experience. These things are not going to virally spread the way they need to unless we're very good at what we do as a business. So that was the idea. Yep, we're good on the policy stuff, we're good on the technology, let's get better on the business side.
Yeah, that seems right, totally right. Christina.
My co-op is only like 2 or 3 years old, so we're a baby, and we definitely have a lot of I'm excited for us to move forward and get better in all these ways. I definitely these co-ops don't exist unless you are making some level of money, so you need to be able to keep the doors open and make it be a positive experience overall, and I still have a lot to learn in that space, to be honest. I think that to answer one of the person's questions, I think they asked about local institutions or local. I am such like local politics matters so much, especially in the context of climate change and housing. Like basically all housing policy happens at the local level. There are unquestionably there are some big and very janky and bad federal housing policies that that would be very awesome if things changed, but like most decisions happen at the local level, especially for housing and kind of access, but for clean energy as well. Like most decisions happen on the state level. Like the state legislatures and public utilities commissions across the country like rule the show in regards to clean energy, which in some ways is like nice because no matter who is in kind of what kind of political power or political party is in office, certain states, if they so choose, can continue to like move the ball forward. It also means we have a patchwork of policies across the country, which in some ways is really fun because there is like exploration and change and the like labs of democracy or whatever happen at the state level. So yeah, it's because of the death of local newspapers and like the kind of dearth of like, you know, limited access to kind of real-time local news and engagement. It's much harder to have a steady stream of information and be able to be like engaged in some ways at the local level, and also like your time matters more at the local level. Like you as an individual, each and every one of you can make a bigger impact at the local level, and that those like kind of changes and movements will trickle up. So my plug for getting involved in local politics.
Yeah, I would just echo that. It's super important to learn about what's going on in your community. Like if I said, there's different groups and organizations that that are there to do that, and just volunteering your time, or, you know, a lot of they have different needs, and a lot of time people are volunteering to do this work, obviously. And so there are ways that you can use your expertise to help, whether it's, you know, documental support, operational, financial, labor. Let them know what your special skill set is, and, you know, help them reach their goals and make good use of your time.
Great, thanks. Okay, so now we have a couple of questions that are identified as coming from Canada. I am also myself from Canada, grew up in Toronto. Mother is Guatemalan immigrant to Canada. Now here I am in the US. Very happy to be here. So the questions are, first, in Canada, most renewable energy cooperatives are share capital or for-profit co-ops. In the US, are there more community-owned nonprofit renewable energy projects? And the second question is, most renewable energy cooperatives are led by privileged groups, so few led by women, people of color, etc. This is in Canada. In the US, are there many examples of equity-seeking groups leading energy co-ops?
I would say that just recently there's a lot more, you know, people are more vocal about it. You know, at Amicus, we did start a JEDI committee, which is an acronym for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And, you know, we've opened it up to all 59 member companies and other friends that we have in the industry. And it's basically used a platform for people to you know, to share their thoughts, learn from one another, and then also just making sure that this is something that's front and center for them, right? This is systemic racism and all of these other, you know, racial and gender inequality has been around for years, but something that we've been focusing on as well. And so BIPOCs is one of the things that a lot of people have started to focus on in their communities, right? There are a lot of organizations that need our help, and just kind of doing your research and finding more and more of those organizations to help and do your contribution. Yeah, just do your research and find out who's in your community.
So we too have a strong JEDI emphasis, and I would say in many ways we are a female-dominated company, which is pretty rare in our industry. And in 2.5 years, when I retire in December 2022, a woman takes over as the CEO. So yeah, I think, we're all changing some.
I need to pick a date for my retirement. It's goals.
December 2022 is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
You might want to try it out.
Is it 12/22/22, John?
It's 12/22/22.
I definitely the energy space in my experience is like incredibly white and incredibly male dominated, and which is frustrating. It's like, it's incredibly frustrating. But I do think that, like, for me at least, like when I see like co-ops provide the ability to have not just like that plucky, overconfident white dude founder like running with the show forever, but they provide the kind of access point and ability for like folks of all like walks of life to be involved, but also that like touch point of like my co-op just the past few months like decided that one of our goals was that we were going to be not a majority white male, white cis male, and that feels, the fact that we were able to make that decision as a group, like that's a priority for us. As a community, that's a priority for us, and we're going to try to work towards that. And in a like traditional business setting, that like obviously there's a ton of like diversity inclusion kind of programs or whatever at small or large businesses, but the fact that we can make that decision together and collectively decide to move forward in that way and act in that way, and bring more folks along in the process feels like very important to me.
Yeah, the action part, right? Like, not just joining a committee or starting a committee or being a part of this group. It's like, what are you physically doing to make these, or to have your company look the way you want it to look? Because you're right, being in solar, it is predominantly male, white. And I started as a Mexican female in a Japanese corporation. So I've seen it all.
Well, here in TFS, we also have created a very similar sort of the Jedi committee that you guys were talking about, and I think it's been great. Owners and employees, everybody gets together and discuss all these issues that we are having. I think part of what we've been doing too is we've been able to financially provide support to a lot of these local organizations, which I think it's really important. And again, I think that with TF Technicians for Sustainability, we're in a great position and we can support those groups, and being able to do that is just fantastic. Besides all the work that we have internally keep doing, because I think this problem is something that there's a long way to go. So yeah, we're just gonna keep working together.
Thank you. Okay, so this next couple of questions, one of them harkens back to an earlier one, so obviously answer it or not if it makes sense, but basically, do you engage with state or local climate action plans in your work? And I think maybe more broadly, like have you, Christina spoke to the importance of doing local work, but have you found yet it compelling to kind of get in the mix on some of that specific, when people come up with these big climate plans, which is happening more and more? And then the second question is actually just a statement that all GND funding should involve co-ops, but they raised the example of the rural electrification program of the 30s and rural electricity co-ops. I think, as many of us know, many of those co-ops have struggled for various reasons to decarbonize, but if there are any lessons you've taken or from that movement or interactions you've had trying to help them decarbonize more quickly, basically anything on the rural electric co-ops that comes to mind you want to contribute, I think would be most welcome. I'm
really glad someone asked about rural electric co-ops. it's something that I was thinking about when I first even heard the like name of this panel, because co-ops, this might be, co-ops serve around 20 or 30% of the electricity load to the country. Like 30% of the population of the US is served by rural electric co-ops. And most of my like context and experience with co-ops, with rural electric co-ops, is from my time. I spent 11 years in Colorado, and Colorado has a very colorful co-op scene. And rural electric co-ops largely have been run by boards of old white dudes. To be totally frank, it's actually very funny if you go like Google them and just find their like pictures of their boards. It's just like, whoa, it's kind of crazy. That is a weird pastime. But yeah, so largely they've been kind of behind the curve in regards to renewable energy. And I in some ways attribute that to the fact that we have a huge like urban rural political divide in this country, and renewable energy has been politicized. But there are some cool examples of co-ops kind of pushing boundaries and changing that narrative. There's Delta Montrose, a rural electric co-op in Colorado, fought a long legal battle to actually get access. They are a rural electric co-op, but they get their electricity through a generation and transmission provider called Tri-State, and in their contract they were like, you're not allowed to get more than 2% of your electricity from other sources, and Tri-State is like 300% coal, and they wanted to move away, and so they ended up going through this long legal battle. I think it went up to the Supreme Court actually, and they got the ability to source as much electricity as they want from local renewable sources, and they have been, and they've been it's been economically a boon for them. So in terms of rural electric co-ops, there's a lot there, and I'm super curious to see where they go in the long run. I think that once it's very clear that the cost of renewables is going to be like more accessible and lower for folks, if they don't move, it is just political. Like, it's just they want to burn things, which is like, if that's what their members want, then that's what their members want. If that's what their members want and they're legally allowed to do so, that's their choice in some regards. So
I'd like to say something, a little comment about each of those questions. The first one about the rural electric cooperatives, I mean, to me, that's just, it is conservatism, it is risk aversion, it is status quo, what we're used to, but it's easy to decarbonize energy. It just means changing your mindset and changing your energy source. What's much harder is decarbonizing buildings, which account for a tremendous amount of our overall energy use, and particularly the embodied energy. Decarbonizing buildings is next frontier work. It's happening in wonderful ways, but it needs a lot of attention. On the policy issue, it feels to me like you almost can't be in our business and be successful without being involved in state and local policy work. It's just part and parcel. It's part of doing business. It's part of making a difference in these businesses.
Thank you. Let me just say, John, hearing you talk about decarbonizing buildings and the embodied emissions of the materials, it's like sets my heart on fire. I mean, this is where I'm going. I know these green architects, they're like operational carbon emissions, what the building's plugged into. That's like old news, that's like 3 centuries ago. The actual buildings and then the supply chains is the next thing. And I'll just to pick up on something Christina said, it's really interesting in terms of thinking urban rural. Like actually in rural Pennsylvania has an appliance manufacturing economy that's on the skids, but it could be totally revived through heat pumps. And then there's like a lot of potential agricultural inputs, like straw mats for insulation, where you could have a really powerful interweaving of like the building and agricultural economy. So John probably knows a million times more than me about this, but just it's been powerful to me to realize that thinking about buildings in terms of materials and supply chains actually then gives you a material way into thinking in a more spatially like extensive sense.
Yeah, it's very simply that making net zero energy buildings is really easy. We can all do that. Making net carbon zero buildings is tough. And it can be done and has to be done, and it is being done, but it's a much harder lift.
Yeah, So a quick note, I think we can extend, we've been authorized to extend this by a little bit, but I would suggest just 5 minutes to 4:35 if everyone on the panel is okay with that.
Great.
I'm going to put out one last round of questions just now, 4 questions, so pick, and then we'll have time for like some closing remarks. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay. So Raphael, Ruby, if you want to jump in on the previous, but I'm just trying to, wrangle things in. So, okay, so this is a sort of a package of questions. The first one is a bit longer and the other ones are all tighter. The first question is, I'm a member of a software co-op in Argentina. We know it's difficult to scale or grow too fast. We'd created a tech co-op network in Argentina, 25 co-ops. We found a way to scale, creating inter-cooperative teams. So a 25 developer team from 7 different co-ops, and it was great. Have you ever thought of scaling through inter-cooperation instead of very big co-ops, small co-ops with sectoral networks where they share knowledge and culture and work? So kind of a question about like inter-cooperative scaling, if you want to take that lesson from Argentina. That's one. Second, can anyone address around impact investing, the idea of using a self-directed IRA so that the investor can get a credit on their taxes? Something I don't know a single thing about, but hopefully one of you does. There is a question about participatory budgeting in the Green New Deal. I'm going to kind of skip that. I think that raises this like big policy morass. It feels a bit outside the scope of this. And then finally, what recommendations do you have for folks who are interested in a career transition into renewable energy? What entry-level opportunities are available at Amicus or renewable energy or other Green New Deal related fields? So there's a question about inter-cooperation. There is a question about tax status and IRA and investing. And there's a question about how folks can basically like break into this industry and presumably with a emphasis on the cooperative.
I'll take a quick stab at the inter-cooperation. That is what Amicus is. That's what Building Energy Bottom Lines is. And those companies, because, those co-ops, because they have a number of worker co-ops in them, that has spread in a big way. So yes, inter-cooperation is happening and it's really important.
Great.
Yeah, and it's working really well. I think that people love that. People really love to see all these co-ops getting together. And we're here in Tucson, but we are members of Amicus who interact with all these other co-ops around the country, in Colorado, like Namaste, and it's just incredible to see all this work that is happening across the country.
Yeah, we also have a member in Canada and at least a handful of others that are asking to join, as well as other co-ops and in Mexico. So expanding. And then to answer the question about entry-level positions or someone wanting to get into the renewable space, I would say, do a quick Google search of solar companies in your city, there are other websites as well that have job postings all the time. There's a trade show that usually happens nationally that is going to be virtual this year. I'd encourage you to check on there.
Can I ask you just a quick follow-up, Ruby? You said you worked in a Japanese company. Now you're doing Amicus. Is it easier or harder to break into like the conventional private sector or the co-op economy for renewable energy? Are there different ways into each?
Yeah, well, it's completely different. So I worked for a Japanese company that is a module manufacturer. So that's how I got into solar. And a lot of the Amicus members were actually customers of that there. So I've had a lot of these long relationships. And then when Amicus started, like John said, it was just a bunch of smaller local companies, friends in the industry that how are we going to compete with these national, companies coming into our backyard? And so that's how Amicus was born, and it grew and grew and grew and continues to grow. And a handful of those were already my customers. Namaste Solar that John mentioned, that's how I met Stephen and Blake, who started Amicus Solar Cooperative. And so, it's just like building of friendships and just in this industry. Like when I first started, you could name all of the module manufacturers, and today I couldn't even name half of them. So it's definitely grown and the industry has evolved, but yeah.
What were the other two questions?
Oh, that I had asked. Where
Yeah.
one was about the IRA and the other one was about intercooperative, which you answered. The IRA, the intercooperative, and the how to get into this industry.
You know, about the IRA, I don't know the answer to that, but the guru of local investing, Michael Schumann, Local Dollars, Local Cents, he has a number of books and a very active website, and he does have those answers.
Thank you. Helpful. Michael Schumann. Okay, Raphael or Christina?
I don't have a lot to add to any of those. I think for me, for my like personal kind of entry into this space was through the like nonprofit world, and for me that was super helpful because that, you know, if you find a space, if you find a way in like tiny nonprofits to do, for me I was, you know, tending to do advocacy and such, but yeah, I got to learn a tremendous amount, and yeah, and yeah, I got to learn more and like fumble through things more in that space than I think I would have like been given the breadth to, if I had like jumped into a more traditional business oriented space. So
I would add also it's different working for a corporation where you're more of like a number. They're very numbers driven, to a co-op where actually feels like you have, you know, all of these extended family members who actually care about you as a person, and your personal well-being is more important than, you know, the revenue you're generating.
Mm. That sounds really nice. Raphael.
Well, I can share my story how I got into the industry, because I think it relates a lot to how, you know, that question about how there's entry levels. About, I think there's a lot of ways that you can get into renewable energy. I really think that the most important thing that you need is passion. I I honestly I didn't know I was gonna end up working here. I for a long time I didn't really care too much about my education. I mean, I did, you know, I was going to school but it was, I didn't have a passion for it really when I was back in Mexico. Then I came here and I started thinking about really what I wanted to do, and I decided to switch my career a bit. And the way I did it, I got a little educated on it. I was not an expert, of course. I have too much to learn. And when I had the opportunity to get this job with Technicians for Sustainability, I think that one of the bigger things that allowed me to get in was the fact that that when I was interviewed by Kevin and Nicole, who are the founders of Technicians for Sustainability, they noted that I really care about it. But at the same time, the only position that they have open at the time was a sales position, and I'm far away from a salesperson. And it's funny because technicians, the way we do sales is very different. You don't have to be a salesperson really. You just have to learn and to show people what this is. And but still, you know, you have to do a lot of talking, and I'm not the most social person in the world. So it was this struggle that I had. But at the end, you know, what allowed me to get in was the fact that they thought this is somebody who really wants to form, to be part of this. He really cares about doing you know, helping us reach our goals, and they gave me the opportunity. And you know, I'm so happy that that happened. I think I have a, you know, I love my job. I really love it. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, it's so great to hear. Does anybody have any closing remarks they want to make before we close out? They've auto extended to 4:45, but if we don't have to fill the whole time, of course. But if you have final thoughts, would love to hear them before we close out this fantastic conversation.
I do. I have a one-track mind these days. This is the most important election ever. Without a Democratic landslide in November, a Green New Deal is a fantasy. So I say let's do everything to scuttle any differences we may have and just get out the vote across the country. Go to voteforward.org, go to swingleft.org, get busy, stay busy. Nothing could make more of a difference now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Definitely echo that. And also, yeah, I guess, you know, we're all here because we, some way, shape, or form, believe in co-ops and also believe in the Green New Deal, which means that we're all sort of dreamers, which is great. And I think that we should keep dreaming and keep, yeah, wow. Okay, like, especially coming from the like electricity space, it's so clear to me that all of our economy is, our whole economy is socially engineered. The whole thing, everything. We are making, like, we're making decisions about how and where our resources come and flow through our economy, and like we should be making better decisions. And we can, and it's all available to us. But I also echo John that we need to get our shit together first. So go vote or whatever, and keep doing all the other stuff in the meantime, because that super matters.
I think we have 3 swing states on this panel.
Continue to educate yourself, educate others around you, and just make sure that they have all of the, you know, there are so many people that don't know, you know, either way, and they're undecided. And so just kind of help educate, or help them educate themselves and learn about what's at stake here, and, you know, what difference can be made. Continue to fight for what is important to you, and you know, our planet. Most importantly, that's one thing that we all share, right? And that we should all be looking out for. So, and thanks for having me today. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. It's an honor for me to be here. I really feel like I learned quite a lot from you guys. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, all I can say is just keep working. The things that we're doing right, we gotta keep getting them better. And there's a lot of work still to be done. So we got a long way to go. I am not. I have never been a big follower in politics, but it's been a bit of a difficult understanding for me since I came to the United States, because since I came here, all I've seen has been this sort of crazy precedent. I just don't know what else to say. It's been very disappointed in so many ways. The things that I heard, the things that I can't even stand listening to anything he says. And I really I don't have the opportunity to vote because I'm still a resident. And at some point I will be able to once I become a citizen. But I do believe that it's, as John was saying, this is really very critical, so that we can keep moving towards the direction that we want to go.
Daniel, thank you so much for putting this together and for doing such a splendid job with it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all. I'm so grateful to the panelists. You've put in time to be here. Our heroic audience, many questions. We got to 90% of them, not everyone. And you know, I think I'm like came into this conversation as 10 out of 10. We need co-ops to win a Green New Deal, and I'm at like a 300 out of 10 now. And it feels like so much else. It's like this is such a terrifying time, and everything could go so badly. But with a electoral like landslide that reflects what we all see in the opinion polls, and if the work is done, like that conjuncture of the Green New Deal and the co-op movement and a new model, economic model, is like, it feels so tangibly within reach. I mean, each of you is literally doing the work. People say, oh, what's the Green New Deal? And any one of you could just walk them through your own workplace and be like, this is the Green New Deal. I mean, this is it in its early moments, but literally doing the work every single day, transforming the economy, our energy system, how we're housed, combining worker justice, community justice together. So it's so inspiring, so exciting, and very grateful to learn from all of you. So thank you very much. Thanks to the organizers, the moderator, the host, the technicians who made this panel possible. So big thanks. and looking forward to continuing onward in the struggle.
Thanks, guys. Let me say, just as the host too, I really appreciate all of the panelists staying focused amidst the early technical difficulties and keeping this important topic in focus while we figured it out in the back end. For all of you who may be wondering what's going on, if you haven't looked in the chat, there are new links for some of the sessions that are coming up. You also should have been emailed all those links. So if you close this out and it disappears, look in your email and they'll be available there. Thanks for your patience to figure it out. There are over 1,000 people registered in this conference, so it's a new territory for us. I appreciate everyone having the patience and participating as best they can as we figure it out behind the scenes. Thanks again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.